Can you hear me, Dr. McGrath?
You are unmuted.
There it is. Dr. McGrath, can you hear us?
I can.
Sweet. Okay, I guess we're ready to start now. Good morning, everybody. So today we're going to get started with our compensation study presentation. I think we have Dr. McGrath on as Zoom, and we have 1 hour with her, but I think Jeff's, do you want to start? Make a statement or anything, or is she just going to go ahead and plow right through?
Just going to dive in so we have lunchtime to respond.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Go ahead.
I'm ready. Sounds good. Let me find it. There it is. We're going to start at the end. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I am Dr. Victoria McGrath. I'm CEO of McGrath Human Resources Group. We were asked to take a look at all of the salary schedules within the county. Our business we've been around for 24 years, so this is not our first compensation plan by any stretch of the imagination. Currently, we have almost 500 and almost 600 clients in 40 different states. So there's two sides to the business. McGrath Consulting Group, Inc. is the parent company that does public safety consulting, police, fire, EMS, and dispatch. And then we broke out into our own company in 2012 because people thought we only did police, fire, EMS, and dispatch. And we do HR consulting from the county level on down. So I want to kind of set the stage a little bit for why you need to do and what's going on within the market. We've obviously had some an evolution of what we call it of compensation factors since 2020, and that is, it started out prior to the pandemic. We started out with, the baby boomers are leaving the workforce, and so some people call that the silver tsunami, but we're battling for talent as this large group of employee population is starting to leave, and then of course the pandemic kind of sped that up a little bit. As people left, and the workforce continues to shrink. There's not enough folks that are eligible to replace the larger population of the baby boomers. And then, of course, with that, we have all kinds of different alternative work styles now that came as a result of COVID. And unfortunately, government really can't be that flexible when it comes to providing alternative workforces. You can't say to a police officer you're going to work at home, 3 days a week. And so as a result of all this, the lure of moving into government is definitely shrinking. In addition to that, the private sector has definitely been able to outpace the public sector in offering things that folks want to see. They're able to do that much more quickly than we are able to do it. And then to top it all off, to make wages even more problematic, is that we've got inflation, and inflation is shrinking the dollar. The cost of gas is definitely, or the cost of milk or bread or eggs is getting more expensive, and unfortunately government also cannot keep up with that pace of inflation when it comes to wages. So looking at your demographics, I think you've got some pretty interesting things going on here. Number one is that a little bit kind of scary. You've got 31% of your employees that have 5 years or less of experience, and we call this the mobile workforce. And you've got 28% are also under the age of 40, and those are the folks, as one of my clients called it, they're the shiny object folks. They're going to follow that shiny object no matter where it is, and if the place next door to you is offering $2 or $5 more, it doesn't matter if it's a different job. They're going to jump to that. And so I think the question becomes, when you look at your compensation system, first of all, can you get them in the door? And then once you get them in the door, what are you going to do to keep them or to retain them? Your average years of service is 9 years, which is actually excellent. Right now, the average years of service in local government is 6.9. But here's what's happening. You've got close to 55% of your workforce is age 50 and over, and they're the ones that is holding up that tenure within your organization. so as these people begin to say, hey, look, I want to do this thing called retirement, this population here is going to definitely increase. So the goal of your compensation needs to be twofold. Number one, you need to be able to attract them and get them in the door. And then obviously, what are you going to do to retain them? You also are probably going to need to start looking at some succession planning as these people with this great institutional knowledge start walking out the door. So what were we hired to do, and how did we do it? Number one, we had interviews with administration. We met with each department director and talked about their department and their positions. That gives us a much better idea of who you are as an organization. We reviewed data of your current compensation systems. You have quite a few of them, and collected job descriptions and policies that are related to those systems. We collected a position questionnaire from every job title. So it's not from every person, but when we met with department directors, we would talk about positions and say, hey, you've got these two titles are exactly the same. Do these two people do exactly the same? And if they said yes, we needed one position questionnaire. If they said no, they really do two very different things, we collected two different questionnaires to see if or not they were that significantly different. The position questionnaire takes a job and evaluates it to 13 different competencies. And so that's how we can compare and contrast the position not only to the external market, but also internally to other types of positions that might have similar types of responsibilities. We collected compensation data from public organizations. I'll share that in just a minute. We collected the salary schedules as well as what incumbents were actually making. That sometimes gives us a truer reflection of the market than just a salary schedule. Once we had the compensation system developed and we created it with union and non-union all on the same salary schedules along with elected and appointed, so we could look at the compression and the internal equity of the entire organization. And then HR reviewed that system with each one of the department directors on a couple of occasions, and then would come back to me with potential changes that were being recommended. So, having multiple schedules creates some issues, and especially if you're negotiating with this group or the state statute tells you have to use this is the rules that you have to use. And so by putting everybody on the same schedule initially, it really helped us kind of reset those salary schedules to make sure there was a hierarchy. If I was going to move to the next position, it made sense for me. It eliminated a lot of the overlaps that you had with some of the salary schedules. And it also gave us a chance to really look at inequities among among similar types of positions that just happen to be on this salary schedule versus this salary schedule. So it took a lot of work in order to make sure that we were comparing similar positions. So these are the municipalities that were approved by the county. There are some from other different states because the county felt that those had similar types of markets. There is no such thing as exactly the same. I will tell you that most of these municipalities, because I've worked with some of them, are paying at the average market rate. They have not moved beyond that. I will tell you Missouri is starting to move up pay that's something higher than average. We were stating a lot of clients in Missouri and Kansas that are now paying at the 60, the 65th, maybe the 70th percentile. You're starting to see that. But in addition to that, because some of the things that we always hear is, well, if these are in different states, do you take into the different economics? And there really isn't a good methodology to do that. And so what we do is we do a statistical analysis around the percentile, and if anything is too high or too low, usually one or two standard deviations, we will then eliminate those outliers so that we don't skew that average in any way, shape, or form, and making sure it's a true average. So we're going to look at, when we look at and comparing salaries, we develop something called a comp ratio. And we do that because we could never come to the same exact dollar amount. So a person we say, hey, the market rate's paying 25,000, and the person says, aha, I'm being paid 24,790. I'm underpaid. Well, no, we look at a range, and basically what we say is the market rate is 50%, and then anything lower than 45% or 5% below the market is really saying that you're really getting to be non-competitive at that point in time. So when we take that comp ratio and we look at two data points, number one is your minimum. Initially, we started with the average market rate, comparing that, but actually the salaries that are being paid by the county are closer to the 70th percentile. So 90% of your positions are at or above the 70th percentile. And there are a number of them that are even, that are higher than the 70th percentile. So let's just say you have definitely maintained a very robust compensation system all these years. You do have 10% that are below the 70th percentile. However, they really are aligning more to the average market rate or the 60th percentile. So you have very few positions, about 1% of your positions, that would be considered outside of the 50th percentile. And again, for the number of systems you have, for the number of schedules you have, you've done extremely well in maintaining that compensation system. We also looked at what people are making. So we looked at what, if you have 4 administrative assistants in this classification, what's the average salary of those compared to the average salary of administrative assistants? And again, 73% of your employees are paid at or above the 70th percentile at this point in time. Now, there is a group here in the 30 to 44% comp ratio, and this is okay because you have a salary range, and you do have, as I mentioned before, a lot of new employees under 4 years, and I would expect to see them at the lower end of the salary range because they just haven't been here that long. Just as much as people above, really there's nothing wrong here. You do have, as we said, a number of longer tenured employees, and so therefore they have reached the higher part of the salary range. It's this small group down here that we have to take a look at, and why are they outside of this parameter. And again, compared to some studies I have, this is really a minimal amount of positions, and again, you should be applauded for your system. So we did look at your current salary schedules. Right now you have 7 different compensation systems. We did find quite a bit of compression issues and internal equity concerns. We have some pay ranges that I can't explain why it's being paid so high. If I look at what the responsibilities of the position are, if I look at what the market says, it doesn't support this very, very high salary range. And so in some cases, we've had to kind of back some of these positions down to become more realistic with what's happening with the market. Another concern, as I mentioned before, you've got these 7 different schedules. I found 15 different titles for an administrative assistant. And so I spent a lot of time saying, okay, let's pare it down to these types of titles, whether it's union or non-union. Let's follow a series, and I think we brought that down to 6 titles altogether. So a lot of work was done comparing positions among the different salary schedules to where they should land. Your compensation philosophy is where do you want to be within the market? And in this case, you're leading the market. The entire structure has been created at the 70th percentile. I'm in the process of working with your neighbor. In fact, I have meetings with them all day today, and they're meeting the market. They're at the average market rate, and unfortunately, we don't have very many clients at all that follow the market. And usually this happens when you've got really financial issues or concerns that you have to deal with. But you are definitely the leader in compensation at this point in time. So as I said, we did build the system set to lead the market. It was built on the 70th percentile of the market minimum. The midpoint, or the position point, if you want to call it, is 16% above the minimum, and then the salary range itself is longer than that. So the midpoint really isn't the midpoint. And we chose the 16th percent above the minimum because you have one group of employees that says they're going to be paid no more than 16% of the minimum. So that's where I built your midpoint on. The midpoint is something where an employee should be achieving within 3 to 5 years of service. It means that I'm fully capable and competent of doing the job. So if you're hiring somebody at the minimum, it means they have just the skills and knowledge in order to do the job. And then it should take them another 4 years to get to that midpoint range. It might be higher. It might take them less than that if you bring somebody in higher than the minimum because they have a skill set and experience level that's beneficial to the county, and you might bring them in higher within that range, and then obviously they're going to reach that minimum midpoint range within a shorter time period. As I indicated before, there are a handful of positions that are significantly higher than the 70th percentile. So if you look at what the current minimum is versus what the recommended minimum salary range is, you're going to see that it's decreased. This does not affect employees. No employee would get a pay decrease. There might be some employees that might be, red circled or frozen because now they're higher than the range. And obviously, this is an opportunity to kind of reset the entire system and to make it sure that it aligns with that. And again, we have made some title changes just because to align internally within the organization as well as to align with the market. I think this is a real key point of the presentation, and that is when we place a position, we're placing the position on 4 factors. And those 4 factors are first the position analysis. That was the position questionnaire that employees completed. As I said before, that creates a points system and then we align positions that have similar points together. We then will look at the market and say, okay, yeah, these positions have the same points, but we're now going to put them in different pay grades because the market is dictating for us to do that. The third thing we're going to be looking at is compression. By compression, it means, if I'm moving from a level 1 to a level 2, if I'm moving from the high position to a supervisor, is there enough space in between there that it makes sense for me to accept those additional responsibilities, and I'm not going to top out at the top of the pay range so quickly. And there was a lot of compression issues that we needed to deal with. And then internal comparability. Are there similar positions that need to be in the same pay range? So after I put the schedule together, like I said, HR did meet with all the directors, and we had an appeal process. And one of the things I will say as I was reading the appeals is this: I got a lot of, this Susie really is a good employee, and Susie really deserves to have this type of, have a bigger increase. Keep in mind, when we're looking at the compensation structure, we're not looking at the employee. We're looking at the position and what the skills, responsibilities, education level, etc., accountability is for the position. And then determining a pay range around that says this position is worth this much. It has nothing to do with Susie. And so if I say this is the pay range and they say, but Susie has a bachelor's degree, my question is going to be, does the position require a bachelor's degree? And if the answer is no, great for Susie for having it, but it's not going to affect the position. And so this has nothing to do with whether you have fantastic people. Obviously, this is a very successful organization, so you have very successful people. But a compensation system and the structure is, how do you align the position to the market, and what parameters are you going to put on it about the worth of that position within this organization? So please do not in any way, shape, or form think because the salary range moved one way or another, this is a personal assault on an individual. It's, again, looking at the position. So now that we've got this reset, now that we have the salary structure in place, you need to maintain it. And some of that you're already doing it, but you need to determine an economic indicator that you can rely on annually to increase those schedules. Some of that's done through contract negotiations, some of that's done through the state, and then for the remaining folks, that's done through your budget process. But you need to make sure that you keep consistency in how those schedules are being increased, so we don't go backwards and start getting that compression again, because you've given this bargaining unit more than you've given the non-bargaining unit, or non-represented people. So you need to do that on an annual basis. And then obviously you've got pay increases to move people through the schedule. And this is where individual performance may take a front seat. And, you know, whether it's a merit system or whether it's through the collective bargaining agreement, that's how you move people through that salary range, to keep them moving towards the top of that range. And then what you're going to need to do is every 2 to 5 years, you're going to continue to take a dipstick out into the market and do another a compensation study. It's not as significant as this one. It's looking at your comps and saying, do you need to make any minor adjustments to that salary schedule in order to keep it updated. I call those kind of minor course corrections, so you don't go from a time period where all of a sudden you're going to have to do this all over again and spend a lot of money in order to get the schedule back in order again. So I am going to stop sharing my screen, and even though I can't see you, I will entertain any questions from anybody.
All right, thank you. I think two things are really important here. One is it's been, I don't know, 30 years since we really did a comprehensive job classification study. And so it's time that we did this, so I appreciate everybody's help. I know Ella and Jeff and the whole team at HR spent a lot of time and angst over all this, so thank you to all the department heads too that took time. I know there was an appeal process, and the other important thing that I know Dr. McGrath mentioned is, and I want to remind people again, that it's not about the person. If I heard it once, I heard it several times, that, you know, Susie is a great employee, but it's not about Susie. It is truly about the job. So, this is the first I've seen this, so I'll be anxious to hear any other questions. I'm sure there'll be some. She's with us for an hour, so, because I know she has to go to another job. But if there are any questions, I will certainly entertain some. So, any from the board yet?
I would say, and I don't see Lola in here. Jeff, maybe you can respond, but so there's going to be a recommended pay schedule for each job classification. I understand all that piece of it. Is the way we're structured benefit from a benefit standpoint? Does it impact benefits at all, and if so, how?
Yep.
I can take the first stab at that, and then I'll let, I think, sounds like Jeff there. The first stab is, when we're looking at the compensation schedule, we're looking at just compensation. We're looking at base wages to base wages. So benefits don't play a part in the construction of the compensation schedule. However, benefits are going to play a role in your total rewards program, and I'll throw that over to HR.
Yeah, so functionally, the health insurance premium rates are tied to where you're at a pay grade level and what your salary is on that basis. So it will not, we're going to align those percentages with the change in pay grades to reflect what those rates currently are, but the rates, since we have a progressive kind of tiered system as far as what your health insurance premium is, the percentage will be realignment. Yes, that will be part of it.
Okay.
That's going to be a lot of work for our
It's gonna
staff.
take
Is
some
that
time,
correct?
right?
Yes.
And we are not, so we still have to negotiate through the union. We're still not finished there. Is that correct, as I understand it?
That's correct. Yep. With AFSCME, I'm continuing discussions with them on their classifications. So that's a work in progress, and we'll continue those discussions with them.
Okay.
From a historical standpoint, how did we end up with 7 different tiers or 7 different levels of pay system?
I think a lot of it just has developed. So we have part of it is collective bargaining. You know, we have Teamster schedule, we have AFSCME schedule, we have the attorney schedule within the AFSCME unit. We have our non-bargaining schedule. We have those appointed deputies, and then our elected officials. Those are obviously set by statute. So I think that's part of how it's developed historically. A lot of it's probably more so related to bargaining and those schedules kind of deviating as collective bargaining negotiations have gone on over the years.
So the objective is to have one system?
It would, not one schedule. We'll still have separate schedules, but was to kind of level set them all and look at them all in the context of, you know, what work is being done by folks in this classification in this schedule and folks over in this classification in this schedule, and kind of level set. I think one of the charges that I had going into this was looking at the equity in the system and the fairness in the system. And are we paying people who are doing substantially similar work, or comparing them appropriately across the county? And that was, and you do that by utilizing the data, a data-based approach that Dr. McGrath went through.
So when we're done, how many schedules will we have?
We'll have the same, the AFSCME and the non-bargaining schedule will be aligned, but we'll have all the other schedules they'll continue to be separate.
Okay,
Yeah.
but 70 percentile is where we're trying to get to and maintain across all the classes.
Across, yep, all compensation schedules, the entire structure, correct.
And for those that you're red circling, how will you retain those employees if they're capped out at the top of their range? What will be the implication on their long-term tenure with the county if they stop getting raises because they've hit the top of their range and they're red circled?
Well, the market says that, and what Dr. McGrath went through, and she could probably speak to this as well, but that the comparators, there aren't other entities to which they will be able to go and obtain better compensation, overall total compensation. So that's kind of the philosophy there, is that those folks will have been and will continue to be compensated at a rate above market, and where they're until the range catches up to them. So that's really the thought process in the red circle.
And everyone will get, no matter what, redlined or not, they're gonna get their 3% and 4% every year, correct? The COLA.
So if they're red circled, and this is kind of the important piece of this, if they're red circled, for future increases, the range has to catch up. So they're frozen, as Dr. McGrath mentioned. They're frozen if they're above max until their range catches up with them. The range is moved every year based upon our cost of living adjustment.
That's what I'm talking about.
Correct. So that's the way. Go ahead, Dr. McGrath.
I was going to say, we also provide the option, and I know it's a difficult option to do, but we have said in some cases, you know, you can give them that 3 or 4% as a lump sum and not as a base building, so that they would still get a performance award, because we can't call it a bonus in government. But you could still, if you wanted to, you could give that percentage as a lump sum so that you're still rewarding them for it's just not added to the base. And as Jeff said, you've got to wait for that schedule to then catch up with them.
Yeah, so I mean, your options are red circle and freeze until it catches up. It's a pure numbers and market-based approach. The option Dr. McGrath indicated, a non-base percentage that you would apply that would reset each year because it doesn't go to their base, or and I know this has been done in certain cases in the past, they'd be perpetually above max if you awarded their cost of living to a red circle. So essentially, effectively, you're saying if you award cost of living each year for people who are red circled, they will be perpetually above max until the end of their tenure with the county. So those are really the three options that exist. And just looking at the numbers and the data and what, and discussing that with Dr. McGrath, that's what we've recommended is that red circle until catch-up occurs, but there is flexibility to do what you want to do there.
And then, is there something about the new scales, grades? What's the deal with the new grades? I've understood there's something with grades from like a 26 goes to a 19.
Yeah, and Dr. McGrath might be able to speak to this in more detail as well, but part of what we did was some range expansion, and that resulted in fewer grades. So the numbers don't align directly with our current numbers. So, for example, a 15 might now be an 11 because we have larger ranges, but we've reduced the number of grades that we have. And Dr. McGrath, you might be able to add to that.
Yeah, the schedule is built with varying percentages between the pay grades. And traditionally, when I first started doing this 24 years ago, every salary schedule was built with 5% between each pay grade, and that was it. And as compensation has evolved, we now look at anywhere from 5 to 10% between pay ranges. That's another way of helping with internal compression within the positions. So as a result of that, the numbering is going to be messed up. In some cases, we recommend that you change the numbering altogether, because if I was a 15 and now I'm 11, people are going to think I got a demotion when they didn't. The pay range is still at or equal to what it was before. So with the reduction of pay grades, it also helps out with people thinking that if I take, I'm special because I need I need to be moving up a pay grade because I took on this additional responsibility. By having less pay grades, we now are standardizing positions more within each job classification.
Okay?
So help me from the appeal process, because this is all new to me. So on the appeal process, how are the appeals being handled? Who is making the determination based upon the appeals? Is that Polk County Human Resources? Is that Dr. McGrath? How's the appeals process being?
We had a group, so we had myself, Dr. McGrath, and Sarah. We met to review the documentation that was submitted by departments for positions they were appealing. We reviewed it, received recommendations, obviously from Dr. McGrath, had discussion about the merits of the appeals, and came to decisions regarding those appeals, and then sent notification response letters out to departments earlier this week regarding those appeals.
Okay, and overall, how many appeals were heard, and what was the outcome of those appeals?
Ella, do you have all the I know there's about 60 appeals in total. I don't have all the statistics with me regarding what was changed, the percentage of that were changed, that were not changed based upon our review. There were a number that were changed. That's certainly in the minority of the. I just don't have the exact data with me. 10%. So probably about 10% were adjusted. Go ahead.
Yeah, and also to speak to that, I think because our process spends so much time on the front end of it, we usually have a very small number of positions that change as a result of the appeal process. And first of all, I need to compliment Ella. I've never seen anybody compile the data that was submitted by employees and or supervisors in such an effective manner that it made the appeal process easier to wade through. But because, we spend time with department directors in the beginning understanding the position. We have the position questionnaires. We have the job description. HR went back to every department again and talked to them about the positions and their placement, and we had a dialogue. By the time it comes to the appeal process, it really has to be shown of what has significantly changed with this position that we didn't see through this whole process, or it has, there are times when something changes, something has been added because this was a multi-month process. So again, I don't have the appeal log in front of me either, but there were some changes. A lot of them was what you provided is the same information that we evaluated initially.
And what's the schedule for implementation of this whole process, and how will it be rolled out?
That's going to depend a lot on a couple different factors. One is union negotiations, and the second is with implementation on back end and all the things that need to happen with our kind of technology resources to be able to implement. As I mentioned, it's tied to the percentages of health benefits are tied to pay ranges. So there will be back end work that will have to occur as well. Obviously, I think one of the points of this as well is that nobody's obviously salary is decreasing, right? And so the system is in place to and able to go status quo until that implementation date is selected based upon a number of factors that still have yet to occur. The finalization of the AFSCME schedule and then the back end work after formal adoption of the schedules by the board.
Do we have a target?
I have some. It would be. I had hoped to be able to do that before I left the county. I'm not sure that that's going to be realistic. Part of it, I still have to have discussions with TJ on some of the back end implementation things that need to occur.
That's very reassuring, Jeff.
Well, no, I mean, I think just talking with TJ, I gave him
Yeah.
a soft goal of end of the third quarter, but I don't know yet. We got to face reality in terms of there's a lot of work to do on the JD Edwards system to get this compatible with the changes.
And the
As
union
Jeff said,
hasn't.
no one's getting a pay decrease, no matter before or after this. So as soon as it's ready to go, and we can do it
Yeah.
accurately and efficiently, we'll launch it.
When does the current collective bargaining agreement expire?
2027, yeah. So 6/30 of 27. We have wage reopeners this fall
Oh, okay, all right.
for the last 2 years of the contract.
So the question that I had asked initially when we talked about this was, we know what roughly the cost is for the first year of this implementation. The number we had was around $3 million that it was going to cost. Is that correct?
For year one,
Yeah.
it was, I think at the time we met about 300,000. What was what we
300,000,
estimated. And most of that is the additional earning capacity that folks whose maxes are adjusted upwards will have as they reach their anniversary dates throughout the year. Future years, Ella can probably speak better to that. It's a little bit in flux, but yeah. You can come up here, Ella, if you want. Ella, you can go up here.
I'm continuing to work with the budget office for 25, 26, 26, 27 projections. Really the cost, like Jeff mentioned, is that additional earning capacity for employees that are currently maxed, that have additional ability to have merit increases potentially in the next fiscal year. So that's really where that cost comes from. Now for the red circle in freezing, there's some cost savings. There's also an estimated cost savings of $20,000 based on vacancy factor per year from the minimum, the current minimum to the new minimum. So as positions come vacant and minimums are lowered, there's cost savings, and that's just based on a 1.5 position vacancy factor.
So, can you just give me a number of people? If we have like 1,200 employees, what's the number of employees that we're redlining, circling?
I could give you an estimation of 215.
215
Correct.
out of 1,200, or be red circled?
That's an estimation at this point.
Okay.
And because implementation, right, not all of that is finalized, as employees continue to move through the regular schedule, right, employees are still receiving merit increases. Employees are being promoted or transferring or retiring. Those numbers are flexible, and HR continues to monitor those personnel changes and how that would relate to the implementation of the study.
Okay.
How many people are getting bumped up that are below their current minimum?
I believe 6 or 7. And again, that continues to change. I think that we'll see that number decrease as folks, early in their employment, right, are getting either their probationary increases or 4%. So that number, depending on implementation, could change as well.
One of the things that I would find very helpful is of the 215 positions that are red circled, I'd like to see their tenure with the county. I'd like to understand that. So just from a perspective of how long they've been with the county, and then also how that would impact future early outs as it relates to any programs that we would be offering if we go that direction.
Right, and HR already has that data prepared
Okay.
in terms of longevity and retirement eligibility.
That would be helpful. I'd love to have it.
Additionally, on the red circle, a good third of that number, that estimated 215, that red circle is estimated to only be 1 to 2 years before they are caught up within range. So I think that that's a significant statistic that kind of informs the employee impact.
Okay, thank you, Ella.
Thank you.
Well, any other questions? Would somebody like to, Annie, come on up.
So my concern is union versus non-union. I have almost my whole department is non-union, and they are going to turn to union, and their deferred comp will go from 3% match to a 1% match. And so that's a huge issue because some of them are getting redlined on top of that. And so when they came in, they were promised a 3% match, and to say that now you have to get a 1%, I just don't think that's right for our staff.
Okay?
Certainly appreciate that. One of the things we looked at as we went through the positions was, does the position meet the statutory exclusion criteria under Iowa Code Chapter 20.4? So what we're doing in discussions with AFSCME, I'm providing AFSCME notice that we don't believe there's a basis for exclusion. However, we're not automatically adding them to a bargaining unit. AFSCME can clarify the unit if they wish to be able to include those individuals within the unit, but they are going to remain excluded unless and until AFSCME clarifies the unit to add them to an existing bargaining unit,
So they're not going to be unionized?
unless AFSCME pursues it. Correct. So that's what we are going to do. But I would note that there's, for these positions, we just reviewed the statutory criteria and determined whether there was a bargaining exemption criteria that was appropriate for those positions. So they're eligible but unorganized, effectively is how we would have them coded at currently.
So, in theory then, so we've been in violation of Chapter 20 all along with these classifications that should have been exempt or should have been contract covered? Is that correct?
Sounds like it.
They've been excluded, correct, and there's no basis under Chapter 20 that we could find for the exclusion, so that's why we provided AFSCME notice. They have an opportunity to then determine what they want to do, correct?
I think that's the key point, Tom, is we spotted we were not in compliance with the law. So
Right.
Ralph, did you have something?
I just wanted to point out that those employees were originally employees of a nonprofit.
Right.
We brought them in-house just recently.
Correct, yes. So
Good point.
Annie Shop is a bit unique in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've performed the analysis now, but, so they'll remain excluded unless and until AFSCME clarifies the unit to add them to an existing unit.
Okay. Any other questions from out in the, okay.
Anthony Jefferson, CIO for Polk County. Just real quick, when it comes to, well, we've got Dr. McGrath on the line. I'm curious about the ranges themselves, because we went from a format that had a larger number of ranges. I understand that the larger number of ranges could present different kinds of problems, but one benefit of that is the flexibility that you guys have to structure certain classes. So the example I'll give you, I may have 3 employees, we'll call them developers, who are in the same class. They're all doing the exact same kind of work, but you've got 3 experience levels. You've got an associate, a mid-level, and a lead. With the old model, you could spread those three positions in that class across an even number of grades. So there was a straight up, 9% gap between each one, so there was equity. The compression of the pay grades now, having fewer of them, the new proposal has those exact same people in a 13, 14, and 16. There is no even number that fits in what we're considering the market rate. So what you have is you have a mid-level that's going up an entry level that's going up 2%. The lead is going up 2% because they're on the even scale, but that mid-level is either got to go up quite a bit more or down. And we've kind of painted ourselves into the corner by having fewer ranges and fewer grades. And so I appealed those, obviously, and I lost. So those mid-levels will go down. So we have 3 individuals, actually 15 individuals, 5 teams of 3, who are all doing the exact same work, who used to be equitably stacked. Now 2 of them are going up and 1 of them is going down. And I think that's wildly inconsistent with what someone would expect from a retention perspective. So it causes challenges for me that way, and I'd like Dr. McGrath just to speak to whether that's just an outcome of the process and there was no choice in it, or was it intentional, or was it really just an unavoidable situation that came with the reduction of classes? Because I think it is problematic.
Before we hear from Dr. McGrath, just really quickly, Jeff, is my understanding that no one was going to lose money? TJ just said that somebody's going to lose money?
No, nobody's going to lose money, but the range, I got
So-
2 ranges that are going up.
So they're going to get red circled?
No. Well, it depends on where they're at in that range.
Right.
So they could get red circled. I think the bigger concern I have is you've got 2 ranges going up,
Okay.
bottom and top, and then you've got 1 range in the middle for the same work going down. And it's all because now we have an odd number of ranges instead of an even number where you could space them so it's equitable.
I misunderstood what you were trying to say.
Yeah. I'm not talking about any individual getting red circled. I'm talking about the philosophy of compressing these ranges, having fewer of them, and losing the flexibility to keep them stacked equitably, that's all.
So under the new system, TJ, you're going from 9% separating each of the classes to
Correct.
3 classes
Yep.
to a high of 16
Yep.
on the upper end to a low on, okay.
Yeah, so instead of 9 across the board, one's going down to 7,
Yep,
and the other one's going up to 17.
gotcha.
So it's just uneven and unequitable
Right.
compared to what it used to be. But I think it's really just a result of the compression of these ranges, and you'd have fewer to choose from. And so the top, the bottom, you got to stick them in there, and there's only 5. So the middle guy's got to either go up higher or down lower. And so I appealed it because I thought it was inconsistent. But I don't know how many other departments, what's that?
Let's
We have
hear
Dr.
from
McGrath.
Dr.
Please.
McGrath, see what she has to say. Dr. McGrath?
Oh, sorry about that. I'm not positive I'm knowing what positions we're talking about, but when we're creating the schedule, you're, the goal isn't to just compress the schedule. That's not the goal. The goal is really to align those four elements and where do those positions overlap. And if I'm moving to the next level, at what point in time does the higher level then have a higher earning capacity than the lower level does? So there's no intent just to compress in order to do that. So you're right. Some of it's just, it turns out strictly because of math. You've got a formula that says, okay, here's how you're going to do your minimum and your maximum. And then, you're trying to then with all these levels to put them all in. And so, I'm not sure how we're trying to get consistency with the entire schedule. So there wasn't an intent to say, okay, we're going to move this one higher than this one or this one lower because of anything other than aligning those four factors. So aligning the points, aligning the market, aligning the compression, and looking at internal equity. I'd have to take a look at the final salary schedule because the county broke it up into what you're familiar with versus what I'm familiar with to have an idea of what those percentages increase are between. And the ranges, the percentage between the pay grades has increased as well. So it may be 3 levels, but instead of now being 5% apart or whatever, now they're 8 or 10% apart. But again, I don't have the schedule in front of me to say what specific positions are being evaluated here. I don't know if Jeff or Ella can speak to that at this point in time or not.
Well, we can certainly have the discussions with you, TJ. I'd like, if anybody has questions they want to ask Dr. McGrath, I know we're running a little short here with just about a few minutes left for her. I want to make sure if anybody else has questions for her, and then we can get you on that.
I just wanted the board to know that it's not just the red circle folks that are impacted. You got ranges moving down.
Got it. Okay, any other questions? Scott?
Thank you. First of all, I understand the need for the process, and I appreciate it. And, I think that generally good work has been done. My comment is about the process. During the appeal situation, those of us who are department heads work very closely with our employees each and every day, and we're immersed in the system and the processes and stuff. When it comes to an appeal process, that is a highly nuanced sort of circumstance. I mean, there is a lot that goes on in making an evaluation that brings a person like myself to decide to write an appeal or file an appeal. I would have appreciated, and this is a process thing, I would have appreciated the opportunity to orally to argue my appeal. That is to say, when Dr. McGrath and Sarah and the others got together to review these appeals, I would have appreciated the opportunity to have been at the table to address some of those nuances and to be able to establish lines of questioning that would have enabled me to perhaps flesh out in a more nuanced fashion the reason why I took the time to file an appeal. An oral argument would have been helpful for me, I think. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, if you think of anything, submit your questions to Jeff or Ella, and we'll get them to Dr. McGrath. As Jeff has indicated, we're not sure when this is going to be implemented. I would like to also see what Matt has asked for, Ella. So if you send that to the full board, that would be great. And we'll keep pondering this until we see where we're at.
Yeah,
John.
I just add, just to quick summary here. It was 41 years, I think, since the last time, right?
Okay.
So one, commend you guys for approving this process. It's been long overdue. There's no way it doesn't get out of whack over 41 years. So we knew this would not be universally applauded. But having equity in our system is the most important. And so that's one of the reasons why there weren't oral arguments, because if it's on paper, The job descriptions, the responsibilities are right there comparable. If you get into oral arguments, then you get into personality. And that's, I think, one of the rationales for that. The second point I make is, you should also be applauded, not just for commissioning this, but I don't know if Dr. McGrath knows any other county that she's worked with that sets their midpoint at 70%, or our market range is 70%. So all of this is being evaluated in context of a very aggressive and progressive salary range for Polk County employees. So even those folks that are redlined, remember, they're redlined in a 70% structure, not a midpoint of 50%. And so there is both equity internally and equity in the marketplace. If I would say, we're being very competitive. And this is not an easy process. That's what happens when it only happens every 41 years. And I just want to commend Dr. McGrath, Jeff, thank Sarah for her service in the appeal committee, and Ella's just done stellar work on this, and it's been very, very well done in my eyes.
I just want to say one last thing, Madam Chair. So, and I mentioned this before, and I think it has some relevance. You know, in my former life, many, many years ago, as a union negotiator, I carried around the Polk County contract with me because I negotiated for cities and counties and schools all over the state of Iowa. Multiple school districts in small cities, large cities, counties, and what have you. And I carried the Polk County contract with me and the pay scale with me. And I always wanted to argue, why can't we have this pay scale right here? Because none of them had it. None of them, not one, was even close.
Okay. Thanks, everybody, for taking your time to be here today.